Hello and welcome to our service for Maundy Thursday. Before we begin, I want to say how grateful I am and how pleased I am that you join me for these services and the community that we produce when we worship together. As I've been preparing the services, I've had time to reflect on worshipping in our own homes. And I'm aware of a lot of the differences that come from worshipping separately and yet together. One of the things that has occurred to me is how much I miss that time of walking into a place of worship, of having time to prepare and to be there. And so before I lead worship, I now take time to stop and to prepare to do so, to make my own journey to worship as I would have done if I joined you in a church on a Sunday or through Holy Week. And now, as we prepare to worship together, I invite you to take some time, a moment of silence, to centre yourselves before God and to recognise that we are here as one community. And so our call to worship. In different households across towns and nations, we come to one table. With our forefathers and mothers, we join the heavenly choir as one people. With those who cannot worship through illness or service, we are held in the embrace of God's grace. With the disciples, we come to the table, bringing the dirt and weariness of the day and longing to be made clean. Bringing our hunger and thirst and longing to be fed. Bringing our fears and need and longing for consolation and strength. Spirit, who breathes God's story to us and through us with whispers of your grace, draw us into your salvation story, that we may know ourselves one with each other and you, and that we may continue to be your love poured out for the world. Amen.
To
So we hear part of the story of that Last Supper of Jesus with his friends from John's Gospel, chapter 13. And today we hear it through a video clip.
It was now the day before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. He had always loved those in the world who were his own, and he loved them to the very end. Jesus and his disciples were at supper. The devil had already put into the heart of Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, the thought of betraying Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had given him complete power. He knew that he had come from God and was going to God. So he rose from the table, took off his outer garment, and tied a towel round his waist. Then he poured some water into a wash basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and dry them with the towel around his waist. He came to Simon Peter.
Are you going to wash my feet, Lord?
You do not understand now what I am doing, but you will understand later.
Never, at any time, will you wash my feet.
If I do not wash your feet, you will no longer be my disciple.
Lord, do not wash only my feet, and wash my hands and head too.
Those who have taken a bath are completely clean and do not need to wash themselves, except for their feet. All of you are clean. All except one.
Jesus already knew who was going to betray him. That is why he said, "All of you except one are clean." After Jesus had washed their feet, he put his outer garment back on and returned to his place at the table.
Do you understand what I have just done to you? You call me teacher and Lord. And it is right that you should do so, because that is what I am. I, your Lord and teacher, have just washed your feet. You then should wash one another's feet. I have set an example for you, so that you will do just what I have done for you. I am telling you the truth. And now I give you a new commandment. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. If you have love for one another, then everyone will know that you are my disciples.
So again, we hear the imagined words of Mary. Another meal. After the excitement of palms waving, shouts of the kingdom, we sit, subdued, wondering what's to come. The jokes have dried up, appetite's gone. A funeral feast. Jesus stripped. Embarrassment flared, jumping from eye to eye until no one's eyes met. The floor, all we saw. What was he doing? We heard water poured. A gasp as he knelt, washed. I cringed back into the corner, hoping he wouldn't notice me, that only the men would receive his attention, remembering my touch on his feet, cleansing, healing, thanking. All wanted to object, to stop him, to take his place, but words failed. Breath stopped. Frozen. Stuck. Waiting. You can't! Peter's indignation tearing the air, sending shockwaves, voicing all our thoughts, wording all our feelings. I must. No less shaking or shocking. So he knelt. The water in the bowl transforming from clear to murky, muck from the day merged in muddy mess, no one excluded. Andrew and Peter, John and Judas, all that weighed us down, washed away by his love. I've spent some time wondering what it means to celebrate this feast when we're apart, what the story might mean for us this year, surrounded by the need to isolate, concerns for loved ones, spaced out queues for shops, language of social isolation filling our ears and our headlines. Then I began to look at the story again. In John's Gospel, we get very little detail of the meal itself. No talk about bread and wine, body and blood. Instead, we get a very different act of grace and communion. Jesus shows God's self-emptying love by removing all of his garments, all that marks him out, that covers him up. Stripped bare in an act that foreshadows the cross, he washes the muck off his disciples' feet. Bear in mind that this was no mere symbolic act. Yes, there's symbolism, but it wasn't an act of washing feet clean that were already clean, but a true act of cleaning the muck and the filth that had gathered from walking on streets where the other traffic was made up of livestock, horses and donkeys. I'll leave the state of those feet to your imagination. As I read the story of Jesus cleaning the disciples' feet, all the disciples' feet, including those who would betray or deny him, I think also, and put them alongside other stories I've read today in newspapers and news headlines. The student doctor attempting to change a catheter and becoming covered with its contents. Consultants learning how to turn over patients to help them breathe. Bus drivers becoming infected as they continue to transport people. And so many more besides. I thought also of the endless messages to wash. Our hands, not our feet, but still to wash. And I wondered about how we could remember, bring back that act of Jesus and act as Jesus' hands now. How would it be if every time we wash our hands, it became an act of prayer? and we recognised it as an act of love to ourselves and to all those around us. If we recognised God with us in that simple act, bringing cleansing and lifting our burdens. If we used it to let go of those unnecessary things which we cling to so tightly. If we used it as a time to think of the needs of the world for healing and to hold those needs before God. As I thought of that meal told of so vividly in the other Gospels and in passing in John's, that meal where all are gathered together and were fed and empowered for what was to come, where Judas shared a dish with Jesus and received no less than the others. I thought also of the shared meals of these strange times, of restaurants delivering meals to hospitals for tired staff and those too busy to make food for themselves, of food banks and their volunteers, of meals shared on the internet and recipes shared on WhatsApp, of those learning how to bake and how it feeds body and soul. And I wondered how we could make every meal a communion, savouring each mouthful and giving thanks for all we've received, realising the grace of God in all we receive, remembering God's love poured out for us, but also being reminded of those whose need is great, of the children who are hungry and the parents who go without so their children can eat, of households where abuse makes mealtimes and all times ones of fear and pain, of those who eat alone and those who long for food to eat, and so many more besides. And then too I began to wonder what it is to heed Jesus' command to love as he first loved us. For many of us today, that love can best be shown by staying home, so that in doing so we prevent others from being infected. And if you're an activist, that can be hard. For me, one of the hardest phrases in the covenant prayer is that one that asks that I be laid aside for God. We feel the urge to get up and do something. We don't want to sit and wait. And yet, for many of us, in many different ways, that is what we are being called to at the moment. That is how we are showing love for neighbours and friends, for those in the NHS, for so many more. In that we join a worldwide community of those who sit and wait. And as we read the Gospels, and as the story of God's love continues through John's Gospel, we see that that too is what the disciples were called to do. They're called to watch helplessly as Jesus is taken to his death.
In an upstairs room, a parable is just about to come alive. And while they bicker about who's best, with a painful glance, he'll silently rise, their Savior, servant, must show them how, by the will of the water and the tenderness of the towel. And the call is to community, the impoverished power that sets the soul free, in humility to take the vow that day after day we must take up the basin and the towel. In any ordinary place, on any ordinary day, the parable can live again, when one will kneel and one will yield. Our Savior's servant must show us how, by the will of the water and the tenderness of the towel. And the space between ourselves sometimes is more than the distance between the stars. By the fragile bridge of the servant's bow, we take up the basin and the towel. And the call is to community, the impoverished power that sets the soul free, in humility to take the vow that day after day we must take up the basin, and day after day we must take up the basin, and day after day we must take up the basin and the towel.
So let us pray. Loving God, in this time of waiting and yearning, we give you thanks for your grace that is with us all the days of our lives. In the quiet, we hold before you all those who are in need. We give you thanks for all who show your love, those who do so as carers or in the NHS, as servers in our shops, and in so many other ways, and those who do so by waiting and longing for the healing to come to this world. And we pray that you will continue to inspire us, to fill our hearts with your peace and your strength and your power. And we do this as we pray the prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. In a moment we will hear what happens at the end of that meal as Jesus is arrested. And then we will listen to music and go without blessing, but remembering Jesus' words. My peace I give to you, my peace I leave with you. So let's hear the next part of the story, the end of that meal, from John chapter 18. After Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with the police from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward and asked them, "For whom are you looking?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Judas replied, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they stepped back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "For whom are you looking?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you're looking for me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. "I did not lose a single one of those whom you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back in its sheath. Am I not to drink the cup that the Father's given me?" So the soldiers, their officer, and the Jewish police arrested Jesus and bound him. First they took him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest for that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter was standing outside at the gate. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out, spoke to the woman who guarded the gate, and brought Peter in. The woman said to Peter, "You're not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it, warming themselves. Peter also was standing with them and warming himself. Then the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple where all the Jews come together. I've said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said to them. They know what I said." When he said this, one of the police standing nearby struck Jesus on the face, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered, "If I've spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I've spoken rightly, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing warming himself. They asked him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, I am not. One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, Did I not see you in the garden with him? Again, Peter denied it. And at that moment, the cock crowed.
Holy Jesus, how hast thou offended that man to judge thee, hath in hate pretended, by force derided, by thine own rejected, O most afflicted, who was the guilty, who brought this upon